I'll give people a minute or two to get their headphones on, because if you have them, it helps, but if not, cool. My name is Jason Belk, and I'll be sharing today learning Yang in the NSO playground. And a little bit about myself before we dive in, just so you can get some context. I started my career in Cisco IT in the network operations team. I was in the campus and branch team, so on-call, pager duty, all that kind of stuff. Our team was moving into doing more network automation, and I got to getting to use Cisco NSO. And it helped me learn Yang so much that I think it's kind of a hidden superpower that even if you're never going to use NSO in your day job, it's kind of a fun way to learn how Yang works. Because at least for me as a network engineer, Yang was really confusing. Like, usually people point you to the IETF documentation or maybe some YouTube videos from 5 to 6 years ago. I've created some content since then, but there's other people as well. But what I'm trying to do today is not to boil the ocean and make you a master of Yang, but get you excited enough, interested enough about it that it feels more relatable, it feels more approachable. And that you can walk away today saying, oh, I have a slightly better understanding of what Yang is and how I can use it and how it works, rather than just seeing these statements that tossed around. Now, I guess I should mention I'm in the Cisco Learning and Certifications team. So like for me, teaching is a passion. Through my own struggle of learning, I want to share that learning. I think for me, because it took so long for me to understand this stuff as a network operations engineer, it makes it easier for me to teach it to other people because I just share my thoughts, and hopefully I've found them helpful for other people as well. So just a few housekeeping notes. There is the Cisco WebEx app. You can leave your feedback there. I've already put the links for the GitHub repo that we're using today, as well as the NSO playground. So feel free to drop notes in there, and I'll be following that along. In terms of a high-level flow of what we're covering today, we'll give you basically why does data modeling matter, more or less, to start out, and then move into some of the nuts and bolts behind Yang, so Yang statements, Yang data types, and then I'll walk through the flow through slides using screenshots and some text saying this is what I'm going to do with red boxes and squares to kind of show you where the important parts are. Even though this isn't a lab, I've found, at least in my experience, referencing these Cisco Live presentations later on is a huge benefit. And if you haven't done that before, like sometimes instead of going on YouTube, just go to Cisco Live and check out past presentations from previous years, check out the PDFs, and you can just learn so much. And so that's what I'm hoping that today can be for somebody else. And then I'll have a live demo where I'll walk through the process at the end. So first, CLI versus API. Basically, why should we even care about APIs? There's whole presentations on this topic, but I want to at least set the stage. That you can see up here on the left-hand side, we have some text configuration. It's formatted for us humans in a way that we can understand. We can see, okay, the router has a name, the router has an IP address, it has an operational status. When you read that as a human, you're able to parse that and understand what's going on, understand the relationships between the name and the value on the right-hand side. Versus a computer needs a lot more context. And XML is a good example of that, where it's really hard for us humans to read unless you've been working with it a lot. But it's basically telling us the same thing. It's saying we have a router name, we have an address, and all of that is within a hierarchy of some type of configuration. And I'm not going to do a crash course on XML. That's a whole other presentation on itself. So unstructured data itself, like for us, for network engineers, that first line should make a lot of sense. The second line should make a lot of sense. Even if you can't remember exactly what every field does, you understand the flow that when you're typing in your commands, you hit the question mark, like, oh yeah, I need to do TCP or UDP for my ACL. And the machine, if it's just given text, it generally doesn't know what it means. It needs to know the context. Like for us humans, we're great at understanding context through our previous knowledge. But a machine, it just works based on the context that it's instructed to do. And so we need to provide those instructions, provide that context, provide the constraints of the data, and that's really where Yang comes in. And we need to be able to tell the computer what are the constraints, what are the fields we should be doing. When you hit question mark on your terminal and you're trying to figure out the available options for your commands, Yang defines that structure. And so when we're talking about like netconf Yang, restconf Yang, netconf and restconf is just shooting the data over. You could have a netconf payload, I've done this myself, that's just one big text blob. It doesn't need to have Yang. Of course, it's not nearly as useful in that direction, but Yang is telling the machine, hey, when I say router, I'm talking about a particular type of string. I'm talking, it has a certain meaning to me. When I'm talking, and we're going to go more into detail, this is not the only slide on what the Yang statements are going to be, but just to kind of give you a high-level overview, is that what we're doing with Yang is that we're telling the computer, this is the context, these are the constraints on the data that we're going to be working with. And I try to use these arrows to kind of point, okay, router is going over to our XML payload on the router. So some things to know about Yang. Yang is in a tree hierarchy, and you can see that visualized there on the right. If you haven't done any computer science stuff, that's totally fine, but you can kind of figure out like where, in the sense that the data starts somewhere at the root, kind of like a Linux file system, and then you have submodules, basically information that flows up to that from your root point. And it really doesn't care whether you're working XML, JSON, protobuf, whatever else. Yang is just telling the machine, here are the constraints of the data, and if we happen to put it in JSON, if we happen to put it in XML or some other future data encoding format, Yang needs to have some type of way to convert those, which is where the Yang tooling comes in, but Yang itself doesn't really care. And I'd say one of the things that helped me understand Yang a little bit better is it helps us understand the expected inputs and outputs for our data. Because if you think about like a black box, if we feed stuff into it, like if I feed, bread, mustard, turkey, out comes a sandwich. Like there has to be something in the middle. And so if we tell Yang will give us the constraints of the inputs, saying we need to have bread. You can't put it in a baguette. You can't put it in a bagel. It needs to be sliced bread. Giving us, let's say for ACLs, you can say we need to have this certain port range. Or for, SNMP strings, it needs to have maybe a certain length of the string. You can't have 10 million characters. It can only have 1048 or whatever the number is. And also what features are available. And so this is something that when a network device is advertising its features, Yang helps with that, where it says, does this device have BGP? Does it have OSPF, EIGRP down the list? And so Yang gives us those capabilities to be able to tell our automation, hey, I'm a network device, and this is what I can do, and these are the things I can expect to come in, and these are the things I'm expecting to come out. And you as a network engineer are probably not going to be touching Yang unless you're in a service provider or a big enterprise who has something like Cisco NSO. A lot of times this is behind the scenes. You're not writing, in my experience, lines of Yang yourself very often. But in the process of what I'm showing today, I'll be showing you small snippets of Yang that you could write yourself, play around with. It helps you in the process of learning to play around with simple examples. So that way when you see a complex example like the IETF Yang or OpenConfig Yang that's like 10,000 lines and all these crazy curly brackets, you can at least have some parsing framework in your own understanding to be able to understand what's going on. And so the examples I'm giving today are nowhere near production ready, but this is an introductory class, and so that's kind of what we're going for. So some of the basic building blocks of Yang. You can see we have some highlighting here based on I was using a screenshot from VS Code. We have a Yang module. See at the very top it says module, router module. So when talking about the hierarchy, that's saying this is the root, this is everything inside these curly brackets is my data model. And we have a namespace because you could have different types of interfaces. Let's say you have interfaces for Cisco, you have interfaces for Nexus, iOS XE, XR, and they could all have interface. And so Yang needs to know which type of interface you're talking about. And that's where the namespace part comes in, and it helps distinguish between duplicate naming, so that way you need to have those unique namespaces. That's not something you'll be writing, but just for your information. Later on you might see, or even in working with the Yang, like a namespace : what's going on. So like iOS XE : interface, or iOS XR : interface, stuff like that. And you can have import statements, so that basically, just like coding, if you want to use somebody else's data model, rather than reinventing the wheel, you can say, hey, IETF, they've done a lot of work to tell us what an IPv4 address is. So simply by saying import this address and having that somewhere on your machine that the Yang can then pull in, I can then just have a data type, which we'll cover a little bit, that covers IPv4 addresses, and all that gets enforced in terms of regular expressions and certain address ranges, and we'll see an example of that later. And when we're talking about the actual building blocks, what we have here is a container, a leaf, and we'll cover lists later. So a container is basically just like a bucket for organization. It doesn't actually store any actual data. So in this example, router, there's no value for router. It's router and then leaf name. The name is that part is actually storing the data. So router covers all the information from here all the way down to here. It's saying, my router has a name, my router has an address, my router has an operational status. And I have leaf statements. Leaf statements are basically just like little buckets that you have your actual data in. Yang's not saying, I'm not saying exactly what the data is, I'm just saying what the constraints are. Hey, my name's gonna be a string. It's gonna be a series of stuff I could type on my keyboard, letters, numbers, periods, and all that kind of stuff. I also want an address under my router bucket. My address, in this case, is a special imported type that is saying, hey, this is gonna be an IPv4 address. And then finally, we have an operational status. So these are all just buckets with different types. We have a simple type that's predefined. They have string, integer, stuff defined on the IETF website. So you have string, custom type that you can import, example being IPv4 address, and then enumeration being up and down, which we'll cover when we cover types next. So the custom imported type, this is basically, if you go on to IETF website, you can see they've actually done the hard work of saying, what does an IPv4 address actually look like? You know, if it can only have up to 3 digits, they have to be numbers, you can't have too many periods, you need to have, you know, anywhere from 255 to 255, from 0, all that range, it's all defined behind the scenes. So when I say, I want this type of data to be an IPv4 address, it enforces the data, so when someone tries to throw data at my system, it's gonna fail before it even processes the data. So that saves your system from having to process bad data. That's one of the other benefits of Yang, is that you know your data is gonna have a certain level of cleanliness to it. And when I first started my career, I had to deal with a lot of data cleanup. Working with Excel spreadsheets, like an old Oracle system, and like, I'd have 10,000 lines, I'd spend weeks just kind of, okay, these are open fields that people typed in the wrong stuff, and Yang helps us give some constraints in that data to make our data more effective. So I'm not going to cover all the different data types. I'm just giving some examples of some common ones. So you can have an imported statement. You can have some basic types such as string, integer, things like that. And then enumeration is another one you see pretty often where it's saying you can only have these particular options. And it doesn't have to be just a simple string like up, down, but just keeping it simple, saying this operational status, it's not going to be anything else but either up or down. So those two options are using this keyword called enum for, you know, enumerated for short. So it's either going to be up or it's going to be down, and it's going to be called this operational status. And what we're going to be covering today is showing how to do this within what's called the Cisco NSO playground. So Cisco Network Services Orchestrator, I've been working with it for about 10 years. I really love it for lots of reasons that we won't have time to cover in this presentation. But one of the cool things about it is the people who designed this product actually helped invent Yang, which is used everywhere. And so they made a product basically using Yang as their own application modeling language. And because they're using Yang behind the scenes, like if we go through their process of importing a package using their system and have a simple Yang model in there, it will automatically augment the NSO application to add these additional fields. So when we hit question mark on terminal, I can build my own Cisco CLI, more or less. And that's going to be able for us to visualize. And not only that, but because the way the NSO works, it also renders all those options from that data model across all the different APIs. So the CLI is considered an API, as well as the GUI, the graphical user interface. So we're going to be adding new fields that I just made up to Cisco NSO and visualizing what these Yang data model looks like, both on the graphical user interface as well as on the CLI. And that's not to say what people normally use Cisco NSO for, but you can use it for free online in the NSO playground yourself. I have the links in the session WebEx for you as well, and you can basically click to provision, not have to install anything yourself, and do it all within your browser. And there's also a DevNet sandbox that I previously was on the NSO team before my current role that helped get up and started. So if you want to do more in-depth stuff as well, you can set up your own environment with NSO. So now we're going to visualize what do these fields actually look like. So going back to our example for router address operational status, you can see at the top there, we have our hierarchy, our little home button, at the top of our root. From there, we have our namespace, router model. Router model colon the name of our container. And you'll notice that router has no data. There's 3 fields, none of them are router. That's because the router is just saying, I have all this stuff in my bucket. And within my 3 fields, we have a name, could be anything, a big string. We have an address. If I type in something that's not an IPv4 address, it's going to throw an error. And then we have our operational status, and it can only be up or down. And we'll go through these examples live as well, but at least give you a bird's eye view of what's going to happen. Same thing for the CLI. And this is probably more custom if you're a network engineer working Cisco iOS. At least when I was troubleshooting different things, like, I know I'm close to the command, I hit question mark. So after I loaded this Yang data model into Cisco NSO, when I hit question mark, it shows the possible completions. And that's basically what's happening. It's saying, what's the data model? What's my available options? It doesn't care yet what the actual data is. What's the name of the router? Yang doesn't care. It's just saying, this is the constraint. It has to be a string. And so we can see the router pointing over there, name, address, and up, down. So for you to get started with the NSO Playground, this is what it'll look like. Basically, you can click on the top there. It's a little screenshot from the code exchange, where when you click Run in Cloud IDE, it will open up a new tab. And I'll walk through this in a minute, but I always want to show you through the whole flow first, through screenshots, before we actually do a live demo. And when it opens up the new, it clicks to spin up basically a Docker container that has NSO already installed. And from our side, all we'll do is clone down our custom Yang models and have them loaded into NSO, which you can do yourself as well and play around with after the presentation. So when you click to run in the Cloud IDE, it basically spins up a VS Code editor that will have a container running in there. And you can see at the bottom we have the terminal. That's the container which has NSO installed. It has our different NSO packages. You don't have to worry about that if you don't know NSO. We're just focusing on learning this as a Yang environment. But if you do know NSO, it's a great way to play around with NSO. And the DevNet team has done a great job getting this up and running, because one of my pain points for NSO for a long time was it was such a powerful tool that getting it up and running yourself required a little bit of sysadmin experience that, at least for me in my own experience, network engineers struggle with. And even for me, when I was first as a network engineer, like even just trying to get on the jump host, I had to have like a cheat sheet commands, to be able to interact with. Some people are stronger than that. That's totally fine. But I'm just kind of leveling the playing field there. So in terms of commands, what we're going to be doing here, and I'll be doing this live in the demo later, but the source command there is basically saying, hey, Linux, I have some special commands from NSO that I want to be using. Second command is one of those special commands. It's going to be creating an NSO instance. It's going to be creating a whole new database, a whole new set of APIs from that installation, and putting it in that folder called NSO instance. Then we're going to clone down the repo that I have linked in our WebEx chat room. And that repo has 2 packages, one for our router data model, one for a person data model. And then we're going to move into the NSO instance, basically spin up the NSO application by saying NCS. That's one of those custom NSO commands that's going to turn on the NSO application if we're in the right spot. And then this NCS CLI stuff is basically saying, I want to log into the NSO CLI as the user admin with a Cisco styling. The next step that we'll be doing here, and these are commands that you can copy and paste in if you don't know NSO. You're not going to have to customize these, apart from maybe if you use a different GitHub repo. The next step is saying, now we have these packages in here, we need to compile them. We need to have NSO have them in a format that it's able to load them into its system rather than just raw text from our GitHub. So we're going to basically compile all that, load it in, tell NSO, load in the new packages. And you can see the terminal output there on the right as an example. And now that we have those packages loaded in, while we're in the NSO Playground, we actually have a pretty easy way to access the GUI. Because if you think about a container on this ephemeral system, on a public cloud, free, it's like, how am I going to know what URL to go to? Well, fortunately, the DevNet maintainers of that have given us a built-in environmental variable that if we say echo dev nv blah blah, it will give us a link. We just copy and paste that into our browser, and it will bring us to a login page for NSO on the public cloud. And we use admin, and then we're off and running. And the configuration editor is basically where we're going to be clicking to then be editing those data values. So after we click the configuration editor, we have our 2 custom packages, our person package from my Learn Yang game namespace, and my router package on the right-hand side. It basically just does it based on alphabetical order. And so I put little boxes around so you can't get lost in all the other built-in ones that come with NSO. And then after we click into one of those data models that we loaded in, we can start putting in values. So I put in some sample strings of, I'm from Reno, Nevada, so just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Las Vegas. I put in Reno Gateway 1, a sample IP address that works, and selecting for my dropdown. And because NSO understands Yang, it automatically turns that Yang statement into a dropdown for us. I didn't have to do any custom coding. It just said, oh, it's an enumeration type. It has to be one of these options. And so I just clicked up on the dropdown options. And then also the NSO GUI knows we have this data validation from that IETF Yang import statement we did earlier. And so I can put whatever I want in my name field, but if I start putting funny things in my address, like you can see here, 10.20.30.40, ... We're not writing an essay here. It's not a proper IP address, and so it says, nope, that's not a valid value. So even before I'm submitting that data to the database, it's validating from that Yang data model, from the IETF IPv4 address data type that we had loaded in there. And basically the way NSO works as an application is that you stage the data, and then you need to commit it. It's like a 2-phase commit. And so after we put those values in the web GUI, we then need to go to the commit manager, and it'll say, hey, here's the values that we're setting for these particular inputs. We have gateway 1, our IP address, operational status up, and then I just click commit. And from there, it will basically commit it to the database. So if you want to access the terminal, it should automatically pop up the terminal on the bottom hand of the screen, but for some reason if it gets closed, you can always open up a new terminal on the VS Code user interface we'll show in a bit by going to the left-hand side, clicking the hamburger button at the top, and then creating a new terminal. And this is now going through the steps of what if we wanted to configure, instead of through the GUI, we wanted to play around in the CLI. So now that we've already have the information configured, we're actually going to say, hey, NSO, what does that data look like in different data formats? Because NSO as an application has it stored as an XML, but it can convert between the two. So what I'm just trying to show here is that even though we inputted the data as just raw strings, after it's stored in the system, the application can then, using the structure from Yang, you'll see we have the same exact data represented in 3 different ways. We have raw text on the top, we have JSON in the middle, and we have XML on the bottom. We have all the same values, and Yang is giving us the structure. Yang is giving us the structure for how to format just the raw text, for the JSON, and for the XML. You'll see router, name, address, operational status, all the way through, as well as the values that we're talking about. And NSO gives us a pipe feature where we can do pipe display, and you can do question mark if you can't remember the options, to see our same exact data in 3 different formats, which I find really fun, especially because NSO can also like parse configuration data from like network devices and do fancy things like that. But if we wanted to then add data in using the CLI, so previously we showed adding in data using the GUI. What I'm showing is just showing, hey, if you hit the question mark on the NSO CLI, it tells you the available options based on the Yang data model. So we enter configuration mode just like we would on iOS, except for we're in NSO. NSO used to be called NCS, and they still haven't changed it in their applications. That's why it says admin at NCS instead of NSO. So we hit configuration, router, my available options, we see the same ones, address, name, operational status. And then since we already have the data stored, if I hit question mark under name, NSO actually tells us, hey, we already have a string called Reno Gateway 1 for name. And so if I wanted to change that, I could override it, but it gives us kind of a visual hint of within our data model, this is the value we already have stored in there. And we're getting towards the end of the PowerPoint part, and then I'll go into the live demo. So it's now showing, not just showing if we look at existing data. If we want to add new data to NSO, we enter configuration mode. We see our available options. We have the same thing where we're saying, oh, this is what the data currently is. What if I want to change it to San Jose Gateway 1? I just type the name in, I say commit, and then just like we had in the GUI, we had to click the commit button, and it overrides the existing values. And then if I do a show running config outside of the config mode, it shows now we have the new values. So I changed the name from Reno Gateway 1 to San Jose Gateway 2. And we look at the bottom there where I say show running config, tell me what NSO currently has stored for this data. It's now San Jose Gateway 2 with the same IP address, because we only changed one of the 3 different fields. So now let's look at the fun stuff. So this is the DevNet code exchange. Basically what's going on here is they have a whole bunch of different free resources on Cisco DevNet for you to play around with. And this is one of the projects that the DevNet team maintains. I'm not one of the maintainers. Jesus, other people in the DevNet team do a great job for this. But basically, if you click the Run in Cloud IDE, that will open up a new tab. And you can reset it, so and so it'll destroy the Docker container, give us a fresh install of NSO, and it's doing this all live for us as we're presenting. And basically, what I'm going to be going through here is the same thing I have in my GitHub repo. So while that's booting up, you can see I have the set of steps here in Markdown that you can refer to later. And we have our first 2 steps is we're going to be pulling in those custom NSO commands, and then we're going to be creating an NSO instance. Because right now it has NSO installed, but just because it's installed doesn't mean there's a running application. It's just like, hey, I have the potential to make an NSO instance, but it's not actualized yet. And so to actualize that, we're going to use this NCS setup command. And we have our terminal down here. Make it a little bit bigger. And I'll paste it in. Boom. And you can see on the left, NSO instance just popped up. This is like a browser-based VS Code. Microsoft makes VS Code a very helpful editor. That's what I'm using on the side here locally as well. So now we have a local instance of NSO. And if I go to my next commands, I'm going to clone down my 2 packages. So if we go to my GitHub repo, we can see I have 2 packages, learn Yang and router model. And these are the same ones that we were looking over earlier. We have our router model. We're very familiar with this. I have another one that's even smaller and simpler that we'll be walking through. It's called, the module is called learn Yang, namespace learn Yang. And I have my container bucket called a person. They have a name, an age, and a favorite color. And so we have a string, an integer, and another string, because I didn't want to get too fancy with the data types. And so we're going to clone down those files. We'll go back to our Cloud IDE. Let's go back to the terminal. Where did you go, terminal? There we go. OK, let's close off the side here. So now we basically told Linux, copy down all those files, and go into our packages directory, which is where it's expecting for these custom packages to be. And now that we've cloned them down, we can say, hey, Linux, move these packages into the right spot in NSO for where it's going to be looking, in this packages folder. And now that we've moved those packages over, we need to compile them. We need to tell NSO, make these appropriate to be able to be loaded into the application. This now has some fancy make output that looks successful, even though it has lots of verbose output. That's actually what it's supposed to be doing. And now that we've compiled our packages, we can go back to our NSO instance directory. We'll see the NSO instance. The NCS command with no arguments just says, start up the new NSO. And then NCS CLI is going to log us into the NSO CLI. And this might take a few seconds because it's literally starting up a brand new installation of NSO. And now it's ready to go. We've logged in, so now you can see we've gone from the bash terminal to admin NCS. So now we're inside the NSO CLI. If I hit question mark, it's going to show me all the available possible completions. And our data model should be showing up here. So let's see. Person, yeah. So let's go ahead and move into packages reload force, basically telling it, hey, load in those new packages because it wasn't showing up.
So yes, we want to paste 2 lines. So those packages are now loaded in, and we've exited out of the NSO application. So we copied the package down, compiled them, loaded them into the NSO instance, and now we want to see, let's look at the browser version. So we do echo our environmental variable that's already built in there. Say, what is that URL I need to be using this time? And here it is. And I'll go ahead and copy that into a new tab. And we'll type in admin, and I have that in the PowerPoint presentation notes as well. That's the default login. Definitely change it if you're doing production, but we're just doing a demo here. So we can click Configuration Editor up here, or down at the bottom. And that's really small, so it's a little bigger. So we can see we have our Learn Yang person here on the left, down here on the bottom, and our router model way there on the right. So we did the router model last time. Let's do the person this time. So if I click into Learn Yang person, right now there's no data. So NSO has an auto-generated GUI, so it's not always the prettiest thing, but it works. And so from here, since there's no data, since I just spun up a new NSO instance, I just put a new data model, it has the constraints, but it doesn't have any actual data. So if I click on the top here, Edit Config, suddenly now, oh, here's where I can plug in some config. So we can put in a name, which is our string, an age, which needs to be an integer. So we'll get my age, personal information out there, and my favorite color, green. And all that data was validated, and if we put in something that wasn't an integer, it should be saying, hey, that's not an integer. You need to put the right data type in there. Cool. And from here, we want to go to the commit manager on the bottom. And we have these pending values of Jason Green at 35. And we can then commit. And it will save it into the NSO database. You can see it says commit finished successfully there at the top. And we should be good to go. So now we can actually go in and see that same data on the CLI. Because we've already seen that it's validated on the GUI. But we can now see, let's check it out on the command line interface. So I have the source command in here just in case someone's in a new terminal instance and needs to load those commands again, but it should be still working. So let's go back to our tab we have on the bash level, and we're going to log into the NSO CLI using that NCS CLI command. And from there, we're going to see our existing, well, actually, we want to do router, we want to do show running config, and then we should be able to see person, question mark. And so now our data model's in there. We just put in a completely new data model called person, and we can see our new options: age, favorite color, name, and CR just says it's a valid command. You can hit enter if you want to. And so we're just going to we're going to hit age, and saying, oh, there's no other options, so you can just hit enter. So that person's age is 35. If I hit up arrow, I can do person's favorite color, green. And if I delete that and just go one level up, remember we said Yang is a data model hierarchy, because right now we're one layer down from the root. We were saying, I just want to know one particular leaf. Let's go farther up and see everything all at once. So we can see all 3 values: my name, my age, my favorite color. And if we want to take that data and display it into a different data format, the main 3 ones that are going to be helpful for us are XML, JSON, and the one we've already seen, which is text. So if I take that same data, using that Yang data model behind the scenes, it's giving us our structure, where we have our key of name, our value of Jason, our key of age, 35, our key of favorite color, and green. And we can do the same thing on XML as well. So that's really the huge power for me for learning Yang, and was an aha moment, was taking a really simple example like this, and just seeing how does the data actually work. Because we have great tools out there in DevNet for Yang Explorer, Yang Suite, things like that. But that's more working with the actual bigger Yang data models of interfaces, and professional Yang engineers are drafting these massive Yang data models that, if you're just getting started, Yang is trying to boil the ocean. So if you're just getting started, I find this to be a really helpful way. You don't need to have any money. You just go to DevNet, run in Cloud IDE, clone down the free repo, and just start playing. And once you get the hang of it, there's nothing stopping you from making your own Yang data model. That's how I learned. It's like, I just started making Yang data, because we were actually developing NSO services. So for me, there was more to it in terms of learning Yang, but I think if you're going for your certifications, if you're going for your DevNet associate, DevNet professional, DevNet expert, like just getting some reps in and just having some creativity and it's kind of fun to see the different Yang data models pop up. And so that would be my exhortation to you all is go in there, spin up the playground. They put a lot of hard work to make this as easy as possible. Start with my example, but then start playing around. Like maybe instead of a name, let's put in food. And instead of favorite color, we'll say ingredients, and we'll make it a Yang list. A Yang list is basically like a collection of items that have, it's almost like a Python dictionary, where you need to have unique keys. So there's a lot more to Yang, but I think just starting with the complete basic building blocks of leafs, containers, and data types is really what's going to get you started to then start playing around with it. And NSO can do any Yang that's valid, it will render. And so as long as there's no syntax errors or other stuff like that, and there's Yang syntax validators out there like pYang that can help you with that. But I find this to be a really helpful way to be able to visualize that in multiple different formats. If you're more of a CLI person, jump in the CLI and hit question mark. If you're more of a GUI person, click through the GUI and put in those values. And so that's basically what my call to action is at the end of this session, is for you to get out there and learn some Yang yourself. Thank you for your time.